He sat in that quiet room and, for a few seconds, believed he had found peace. The silence seemed to offer rest, as if all the noise of the world had stayed outside. But as the minutes stretched on, what had felt like calm began to turn into weight. It was as if the air itself had grown heavier, filled with an absence hard to bear. He looked around and realized there was no one to ask how his day had been, no one to share a meal with, not even someone to argue with over something simple, like what music to play. The emptiness, which at first seemed like a companion, revealed itself as an enemy. And the question started pounding inside him, is this it? Is this what my life will be from now on? Imagine realizing that silence, once comforting, can turn into a deafening scream inside your mind. This channel is new, so leave your comment, share, subscribe, and help us keep creating content that strengthens and inspires your life. Time went by, and every detail of the house reminded him of absence. The kitchen table, too big for just one person. The photographs, witnesses of happier times. Even the ticking of the clock seemed to mock him, marking seconds that held no meaning. He realized this loneliness wasn't just about being physically alone. It was something deeper, the feeling of being disconnected from the world, as if his life had lost the thread tying it to everyone else's stories. Friends were no longer nearby, children had gone their own ways, and each goodbye left invisible marks. Silence became more than just uncomfortable. It became a reflection of a life that seemed to shrink before his eyes. What would you do if you realized the greatest loss wasn't the people who left, but the purpose that slipped through your fingers? It was at this point that a painful realization took shape. Loneliness wasn't just the absence of company, but the absence of meaning. There was no routine, no goals, no small objectives to hold his days together. Mornings arrived without warning, and nights came loaded with an emptiness that echoed in his chest. The repetition of hours blurred together, making it feel like an entire week passed in just one day. He realized that living like this wasn't just difficult, it was suffocating. His body was present, but his mind wandered, constantly asking, what for? When life loses its meaning, even the simple act of waking up can become a secret battle. The most surprising thing was that this feeling made him see something universal. He wasn't the only one going through this. Many people, as they grow older, feel this same emptiness. People who were once surrounded by family, obligations, responsibilities, now find themselves facing spaces too large, days too long, and silences that cut deeper than any words. This realization struck him like an uncomfortable truth, but also like a warning. If so many go through this, maybe there was a way to turn that pain into something different. He began to look at his own life like someone examining an old photograph, with longing, but also with curiosity about what could still change. The greatest transformation sometimes begins at the exact moment we believe nothing else can change. That's how a restlessness grew inside him. The idea that his story hadn't ended yet. The silence, as painful as it was, also hid an opportunity, the chance to build a new life from what remained. He still had a body, still had a mind, still had a heart. And in that moment, he realized what he needed wasn't to wait for someone to come fill the emptiness. What he needed was to discover how to fill himself. The challenge wasn't small, but maybe that was exactly what gave him reason to keep going. Emptiness can be frightening, but it can also be the perfect space to start something entirely new. He woke up one more morning and, for the first time in weeks, realized something needed to change. The weight of loneliness was still there, but inside him stirred a different kind of restlessness, almost like a soft voice saying, "Start small." Instead of getting lost in thoughts about what was missing, he decided to focus on what he could do. His first decision was simple: get up at the same time every day. It might seem trivial, but that gesture made him feel he had control over his own time. Making the bed made him feel as if he were setting the stage for a new act in his life. It was just a detail, but every detail carries strength when you're standing at the edge of emptiness. Imagine realizing that even the simplest gestures can become anchors to keep life from quietly falling apart. Little by little, those small rituals began to multiply. After making the bed, he made sure to prepare a cup of tea and sit by the window. He watched the street activity, not with nostalgia, but with attention. That warm cup wasn't just a drink, it was a sign that the day had begun. Over time, he added another habit, stepping outside for a short walk around the block. Even if the steps were brief, each outing felt like a declaration that life was still worth living. And the more he repeated these gestures, the less his days blurred together. Hours began to take shape, and his mind started finding meaning in what once seemed like mere repetition. What if the secret to facing emptiness lies in creating small daily victories, nearly invisible, but ones that restore weight and value to time? He also realized the space around him needed to reflect this change. He decided to care for the house in simple ways, one corner at a time. He dusted a shelf, organized forgotten books, wiped down the table. With each completed task, he felt like he was rebuilding something inside himself. He placed old photos in prominent spots, the ones that made him smile just by looking at them. He replaced absolute silence with music that reignited good memories and stirred new emotions. The house, which had once seemed only an echo of emptiness, slowly transformed into an extension of his care for himself. It wasn't just a physical space being reborn, it was also a reflection of his soul. When you decide to care for what's around you, you end up discovering that, in truth, you're learning how to care for yourself. Each ritual, each gesture, each act of tidying was a way to remind himself that there was still life to be lived. He understood he didn't need a rigid routine, just intention. Simply waking up with something to do, no matter how small, made his heart beat to a different rhythm. The morning tea, the made bed, the music filling the air, everything gained new meaning. Sadness still visited, but it no longer owned the space. And in that quiet process, a certainty was born: there was more strength inside him than he'd ever imagined. And that strength didn't come from grand achievements, but from the accumulation of small gestures that, together, were able to give meaning to his days. The greatest transformation sometimes begins hidden in simple rituals, ones that carry the power to restore purpose to life. He realized that organizing the house and creating rituals wasn't enough. He needed to act more decisively, to take concrete steps that would change his reality. So he took his first real action: he turned on the radio and let music fill the room. He didn't just sit and listen. He stood up and danced, awkwardly, maybe, but he danced. That simple, bold choice turned an ordinary morning into a celebration. Laughing at himself, he felt energy return. He understood he didn't have to wait for special occasions to move, he could create those moments himself. When you choose to act, even an empty room can become a stage for joy. The next day, he made another decision. He put on his shoes and went out for a walk. It wasn't a long walk, but it was intentional. He chose to really look at the world around him, to greet passers-by, observe the houses, feel the wind. Each time he stepped outside, it was like a silent declaration: I still belong here. And that attitude, repeated consistently, began to restore his confidence. His body responded with more lightness, his mind, with more clarity. It was no longer just survival, it was a conscious step toward the life he wanted to reclaim. One small daily choice can be enough to change the entire direction of a life. But he didn't stop there. He picked up the phone and decided he wouldn't wait for someone else to call. He dialed the number of a distant friend, someone he hadn't spoken to in a long time. The surprise in her voice turned into joy, and suddenly, the silence of the house was broken by laughter and shared memories. That action brought to light a truth he hadn't seen before: many people feel lonely too, but they're waiting for someone else to make the first move. He realized that by acting, he wasn't just healing his own pain, he was also touching hearts that longed for the same connection. What if the key to transforming your loneliness is also the power to make the first call? Inspired by that experience, he decided to write a handwritten letter. Not a short message, but pages filled with memories, reflections, and affection. When he received a reply, something inside him came back to life. The bond had returned, even across the distance. This act taught him that true connections aren't measured by time or frequency, but by the sincere effort to keep the flame of affection alive. One gesture of initiative can reignite bonds that time seemed to have extinguished forever. He also changed how he related to the people nearby. The "good morning" to the neighbor, once almost automatic, became a genuine greeting. He chose to smile, to ask questions, to show interest. Small actions that opened invisible doors. He discovered he didn't need crowds, just a circle of authentic interactions to warm his heart. Every person who smiled back was proof that his decision to act was bearing fruit. When you choose to open your heart, even the simplest encounters become fuel to live better. And so, his life stopped being defined only by silent routines and began to be shaped by deliberate, meaningful actions. Dance, walk, call, write, greet. He didn't wait for change to come from the outside, he chose to act from within. And with every step he took, the emptiness lost ground. Silence was no longer a relentless enemy, but simply the backdrop of a life slowly filling again with sound, movement, and people. True power lies in action. Because it's action that turns loneliness into connection, and routine into rebirth. The actions began small, but each one made room for something bigger. Dancing alone, walking through the neighborhood, calling someone, he wasn't just moving his body or filling time. He was rebuilding his identity. And in that process of daily choices, he realized something extraordinary: learning to care for himself was the missing piece. Life didn't need to be handed to him by others. He could create joy, tenderness, and meaning from within himself. That's when he decided to write his memories in an old notebook. At first, they were scattered notes, but soon they became full stories. Rereading what he wrote, he discovered his own life held more beauty than he'd ever imagined. When you put your story on paper, you realize you've always been the main character, even in the silent chapters. That gesture opened doors to new discoveries. He started laughing at simple scenes in ordinary movies, cooking without worrying about impressing anyone, just enjoying the flavors. He prepared dishes that reminded him of his youth, and every meal became a journey through time, but also a celebration of the present. Even a plant, placed in a corner of the living room, gained meaning. Caring for it daily became a reminder that life blooms when given attention. The house, once large and cold, now breathed along with him. It was as if every act of care was a silent promise: I'm still here. I still have so much left to live. Real change happens when caring for the things around you becomes caring for your own soul. But the most powerful revelation came at an unexpected moment. While writing, he noticed he no longer spoke of lack, but of abundance. He no longer cried over absences, but smiled at the presences that remained. The loneliness that once felt like a sentence had become an invitation to reconnect with his own heart, to see life through new eyes. He understood that being alone wasn't the end, it was the perfect space for a new beginning. Sadness still showed up, but now it was welcomed as a passing visitor, never as a permanent resident. And to his surprise, the more he grew stronger within, the more people began to draw near from the outside. The neighbors stopped to chat, the friends started calling back, the family noticed his renewed energy. It was as if the world had responded to the actions he chose to take. When you change from within, the world around you responds in ways you never imagined. The turning point came when he looked at himself in the mirror and saw a different man. Not in the body marked by time, but in the alive expression reflecting a renewed heart. He realized he had never lost the ability to dream, he had only forgotten to use it. He dreamed of traveling again, learning something new, sharing his stories with others. And in that moment, he understood, dreams don't expire. As long as your heart beats, there's always room to begin again. This was the unexpected breakthrough, discovering that loneliness hadn't stolen his dreams, but had only kept them safe, waiting for the right moment to set them free. Life always holds surprises for those brave enough to make space for new dreams. And so, the man who once believed he was condemned to silence now lived with renewed purpose. He didn't need grand achievements to feel alive, just the continued practice of the actions he himself had started. Small gestures became great victories. The silence that once crushed him now framed the music of his inner world. The emptiness that seemed eternal was overcome by steady, daily choices. He discovered that living fully doesn't depend on what you've lost, but on what you choose to create from what remains. The secret isn't waiting for life to happen, it's having the courage to be the author of it, all the way to the last chapter. If you're over 60 and have ever felt the weight of silence or loneliness, remember this story. There's always room to begin again, to dream, and to find purpose in every detail of life. This space was made for you, for those who believe there's still so much left to live. The channel is new, so leave your comment, share, subscribe, hit like, and help us keep bringing stories that inspire, move, and strengthen your journey.